Hello and welcome to Light from Light. Today I'm joined by a good friend, brother Giovanni Castellano. Did I pronounce
Hello,
it right?
you did.
It's- So when did we first meet?
I think it's been now 4 years. Yes, I arrived in England in 2021 after my first profession. So, yeah, it's been some time.
Maybe say a little bit about yourself.
Yes, my name is Giovanni, was baptized Giovanni, but then when I was clothed in the habit, I took a religious name. But actually, I added some names to my baptismal name, which I kept. So my name now in the order is Brother Giovanni, and then Giordano Maria, Brother John, Jordan, Mary. We all pretty much had Mary to our names when we joined the order, usually in Italy. But Jordan, most people will think that it's Blessed Jordan of Saxony, of course, the successor of Saint Dominic. But in my case, it's a definitely lesser known Dominican who was a priest, who was a martyr in Japan in the 17th century, and who happens to be born in my same little village in the very heart of Sicily in southern Italy, a place which also Father Thomas has learned to know pretty well over the past few years. So that's why my name in religion is Brother Giovanni Giordano.
Maybe you could say, so how many people roughly live in your village now?
Well, now it's less than 5,000. I imagine at that time a few hundreds. It was very much a rural reality. And yet there was a Dominican priory in a time where there were far more. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but certainly they were much more widespread in Italy and in Sicily than we are now, when numbers are more stretched a bit everywhere, in
Mm.
Europe at least.
I remember when I was a newly ordained priest, there was a period of time where I'd said more masses in Italian than I had in English. Because as
Yes.
soon as I was ordained, I came out to your village, and I remember the parish priest, a really, really kind priest, asked if I'd say mass at the shrine of Blessed Giordano,
San Giordano.
sì, San
Saint
Giordano.
Giordano, yeah.
Um, so today we're going to talk about Saint Giordano Ansalone. That's his surname?
Yes,
Yeah.
that is his family name, which is indeed was the family name of a noble family, which they didn't. They were acquainted with this noble household, but they weren't really noble people by then. They lived in this little village in rural Sicily, and he was born on an important feast, November the 1st, 1598, and he was baptized on the same day. And as you saw in the main church in my village, we still have well the same church, but also the same baptismal font where he was baptized, which, alas, given the way he was martyred and his body was treated, is the only really relic in a way that we have of him, as well as in the register there is the certificate of his baptism, so which is recorded with the name of his parents, with the name of his god father as well. So that's really the tangible thing that we have left of him in our little village. Which, as I said, had a Dominican priory, which you also saw what remained of that. Now it's the town hall. So it's quite incredible that in a little village you would have friars, and so must have been the only, I suppose, education center for him. So that's where he must have done his studies.
And it's not a ruin, that's the thing. It's still used. The building is still used, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can still see the apse of the ancient church and things. Yeah.
So we've got quite a few historical artifacts then from his life. I mean, the font is still there, the font now being a relic of a martyr. The church is a shrine dedicated to him. There's a little museum there as well. And and this is in Agrigento province in Sicily. Is that right?
Yes, yes,
In the
but it's
mountains, just in a,
really in the middle. Yeah,
okay.
quite in the middle.
And you also have the baptismal register, as you're saying. What
Yeah,
historical details then do we know about his life? Presumably, he came to know the Dominican order because there was a priory, obviously, in the town
yeah.
he grew up.
Uh,
What
and,
else do we know
and
about his life?
Well, another sign that he had since he was born is that his name, his baptismal name, is actually Hyacinth Giacinto.
Oh,
And the reason for that is that Saint Hyacinth of Poland, one of the companions of Saint Dominic, had been canonized 4 years earlier, before he was born, so in 1594. So he was given the name of a new saint, whose devotion the Dominicans were spreading in the various priories. So in a way, he was marked by a Dominican character and
mm,
destiny since he was born. And so, yeah, he was interested in Dominican life and he felt a vocation. And so he joined the order when he was 17, rather early, was clothed in the habit in Agrigento. And at the time, there was this explosion in missions overseas. So he must have heard from the brethren the stories of people coming from overseas, from the other side of the ocean, talking about the mission, how exciting it was, but also how much need there was of this of priests who would go there. So he was inflamed with this passion and desire since his early steps in the order.
mm. Do you think that people during that time had quite a romanticized view about going on mission? If I think about people like Saint Teresa of Avila, pretty much contemporaneous, if I'm not mistaken, more or less with San Giordano. She had this great desire to go and be martyred. Um, so I'm wondering, I mean, clearly the Dominicans had such a profound impact in this, you know, uh, small village, at the time. I mean, I imagine they probably sort of very much dominated the social scene and the feasts and all the rest of it. Um, so yeah, having this strong Dominican presence, Dominican connection, capturing his imagination, but then this great sense of adventure. Uh, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, would you say that they had a more romanticized vision of going away? I've always been in two minds because on the one hand there is this sense of great adventure. On the other hand, they knew that actually there was a very realistic possibility of them being martyred, and they knew that obviously that's not a pleasant experience, and yet it was something they desired, even if they shouldn't have, that they shouldn't explicitly seek martyrdom, but simply welcome it uh, if um, if they have to, if they're in that sort of situation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult question given the very different cultural context. I mean, if you think about it, we also are passionate nowadays about evangelization, and we still do go abroad, and some people go on mission in difficult places. I mean, you yourself have had an experience in Jamaica, which isn't the easiest place to be, but I mean, they were really brave. Nowadays, going to the Middle East or going to South America or to the Far East, we do it by plane. They had to suffer hardships just to
Mm,
get there, which I don't know if we would survive in the first place. But suppose they were just a tougher kind of human beings living in a less comfortable world. I think sometimes we forget how comfortable life is in the 21st century compared to that time. That being said, I think we got a lot in common. We got the same passion. I don't know if we have the same courage. Certainly, we don't have the same conditions that they
mm,
had to face most of the time. I mean, something which I find in many friars nowadays, young friars nowadays, and that Saint Jordan had is this passion for languages and traveling, learning other cultures and other ways of beings. He did that all the way through his Dominican life. He first learned Spanish so that he could go and study in Spain, in Salamanca, and from there then go mission. And then he was fluent in Chinese, so much so that when he went to Japan in disguise, he was dressed according to the Chinese custom because he was so fluent that he could, in a way, disguise himself better. And then he also learned Japanese. He even wrote works in Japanese. So I find this passion for learning other languages and getting accustomed, really getting into other cultures in order to evangelize, really in a way which is according to enculturation, etc. Something which is a constant in Dominican life. That being said, I think they were much tougher than most of us are.
Mm. I think you're right. I think we are very used to our comforts now, at least certainly in our provinces, you know. I'm sure there are, I mean, well, we know that there are provinces where brothers struggle more for the daily necessities of life. Um, and yeah, I mean, there are brothers, of course, who are still under threat and in danger in things. You know, I remember one of my co-novices, Augustinus Ersens from the Netherlands, who we were in the same novitiate together. He went to Iraq and spoke to the brothers there. And actually, when I was at Vincent's ordination in Strasbourg, another one of my co-novices, um, I met Majid, brother Majid.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, from he's in Mosul,
Iraq.
right?
Yeah.
And he's an Iraqi brother. He's in Mosul. Iraq's looked after by the French province. And he was saying, you know, oh, you know, there are direct flights from London to Mosul now. Isn't that amazing? And I was like, oh, that is amazing. And he said, yeah, so you can come whenever you like. So there is this real
Yes.
sense of, you know, brothers, even in provinces of very difficult situations, where there is still a lot of joy, even in and amongst their hardships and their suffering. Um, and they want to be together. That sort of um, fraternitas, that friendship, that brotherhood of being together and living together, sharing one's life with each other and growing together in love and charity towards the Lord and knowledge and love of Him and of our neighbor. So it is remarkable. It's not that, you know, there aren't places around the world where there isn't that same danger, but you're right. I mean, for a lot of
We are more interconnected, certainly, in a way which was impossible until just a few
absolutely.
decades ago, not
And the
not
amount of
century.
resources that we have to learn languages now, and you know, if something happens in Japan or the Philippines or Jamaica or the UK or Italy, I can find out about it in minutes, you know, through the internet. Whereas you could have set off at that time, say from Sicily, like Saint Giordano, and by the time you arrive in Japan, you could have a completely new ruler. He could have been there for months. Maybe there was a period where there was more toleration, but by the time you
And
arrive,
then by the time you get yeah,
yeah, yeah, everything can change very quickly. And the conditions of the travel, as you say, being on a boat for months on end, you
for
know,
months, yeah.
yeah, having to reach
That's why on the way
pirates.
to the Far East, yes, they will stop. So they will leave from Spain or Portugal and then stop in Mexico usually for a while. So that's what he did. He stopped in Mexico City, the Priory of Saint Hyacinth. So these names keep coming up, and then there is an anecdote which is quite emblematic in his life. Someone said to him, "Aren't you, afraid of going there? You know what you're gonna face." It was really the most difficult period. There was almost no toleration in Japan by then. And he quoted a psalm. Psalm 114 says, "The Jordan turned back on his course when the Lord passed by." But he said, "Jordan will not
Turn
turn
back
back."
on his course.
So this kind of motto in Latin, "Jordanus non est conversus retrorsum," is a bit his spiritual motto. He will not turn back. So that tells a lot of his courage and his attitude in really embarking on this adventure, which he knew would end up
Hmm.
quite likely in his martyrdom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
remarkable. So when he left, then he left Sicily, but so he would have had to have made his way to Spain or Portugal.
Yeah,
And
he stayed in Spain to do his studies, as most
okay,
people did.
so when he
And
finished his
then
studies, then was he in
he
Salamanca?
is, he was in Salamanca. Yeah,
Okay.
most sources say that. Might have been in another prior closer to the coast,
Hmm.
but definitely in Spain, considering that Sicily at the time was a vice kingdom of Spain, so there was a close collaboration between the two. And the 16th century was the great intellectual development in Salamanca and the Dominicans in Spain. So there again, he heard the stories of people coming from the missions. And when there was the occasion, there were 19 friars leaving, and he begged the prior really that he wanted to join them. He said, "Let's do 20. 19 is not a nice number," and he really wanted it. So he managed to join the company, which was in fact one of the last which set off from Europe to Japan. So they stopped in Mexico, and then he first got to the Philippines in Manila, and there he did some ministry for quite a few years. The Dominicans had all sorts of apostles there. They had a hospital, and there was an excellent way for them to learn languages because there were people from all over the region, and of course to do a lot of difficult humble service, which will prepare them to the life they would have. And the cool thing about that period is that we have another kind of relic, which is on the cover of this book, which is the register where he registered the 3 baptisms he did in Manila while he was there. I think 1630. So it's quite cool to have this other witness of his time there as a priest.
So he's 1600s, not 1500s.
No, it was born in 1598
I see, I see.
and
So he's
died
not
in
really a contemporary of
1634.
Teresa. Teresa was slightly
No, it
before.
was a bit, yeah, it
It was
was
a bit later, yeah. I
later,
always find
yeah.
it really amazing, don't you, when you see the handwriting of a saint.
Mm,
I love that. For my
yeah,
solemn profession, I was given a facsimile of, the notebooks of A Story of a Soul and, the Oblation to Divine Mercy and things that she, or the Oblation to Divine Love and things that she wrote. And seeing Teresa's handwriting up close, even though I can't read the French, I I love that. I'm fascinated by that. In the oratory in Oxford, around the feast of Catherine of Siena, they put out one of her letters. They
yeah,
have one of her letters. So again, to see, Catherine's one of Catherine's letters, up
yeah.
close and to look at that handwriting and things,
We
remarkable.
put so much of ourselves in our handwriting. It's quite telling of our personality and our mood in that moment. So yeah, it's really remarkable. Yeah,
Yeah, I just find that really fascinating. So, okay, so we know then from what you just said that he went to the Philippines first, right?
yeah.
So he went to the Philippines. We have these records of his of the baptisms. What were the conditions like there, and what was it that led him there? Was the Philippines always going to be a stepping stone to Japan?
Yes, given the conditions in Japan, whereby you couldn't just get in whenever you wanted. You needed to find the right kind of moment, basically, to get in secret. You had to be in disguise, and it was always you had to try not to get caught, basically. So there had to be the right kind of conditions, and at the time there was already. I mean, Japan for 50 years or so, St. Francis Xavier had arrived in 1549. And for about 50 years, they were tolerating Christianity because Japan has always had a very kind of syncretistic approach to religion. They didn't mind another one coming in. But then for social, political factors, really less than religious, they started to tolerate it less and less until the open persecution began. So when St. Jordan got there, it was really the apex of that no toleration policy. So he had to get in as hidden as he could, which he did, but didn't really work. So he had to flee to the mountains and stay hidden. So again, a very hard life where he would try and go and visit the so-called hidden Christians. So in Japan, there is this movement of the Kakure Christian, which lasted even after all the Christians had to leave. These hidden Christians, which tried to keep the faith, having no priests, no sacraments for centuries.
Mm.
I mean, a lot of syncretism, of course, came in because they didn't have any kind of reference point, really, just remembering the few formulas they had learned and the few prayers they had learned. So we imagine these hidden priests, very few of them, going around trying to bring comfort, trying to celebrate the sacraments as much as they could. Something which strikes me is that there were vocations already, though.
Mm.
There were already Japanese nuns and Japanese friars. So one of them was killed then with the Saint Jordan, and his name was Thomas of Saint Hyacinth. So again, this name keep coming up. Um, so I'm fascinated by the fact that in a few decades, in such difficult conditions, people had joined the order and admired the Dominican charism so much that they couldn't resist. I mean, people like this Japanese friar had to leave the country in order to join the order and do the formation and things, and then come back again in incognito and try and survive in their own country. So I find that really remarkable how so quickly the church or a religious order can implant itself in a place and even blossom with vocations.
Mm. And catechists become very important, of course. When you have, Japanese martyrs and things, it's interesting to see how many of them are lay people and how many of them are catechists. Um, I think of Saint Mark C. Tianxiang. He was a catechist, of course. So what? So how? His life was very difficult, and he was traveling around celebrating the sacraments. Is there anything else that we know about uh, that time? Is there any extant record of him in Japan and the things that he did?
Yeah, there is this anecdote that he fell ill in July 1634. I mean, uh, quite possibly because of the harsh conditions he was living in. And he asked Our Lady's intercession for a miracle so that he could die a martyr, which was granted. And when this Japanese friar, Father Thomas, had visited him ill, they wanted to celebrate St. Dominic together that year. So it was July. St. Dominic would have been on the 4th of August. But so there was a bit of excitement among the Christians, among the confraternities of the Rosaries, and that drew the attention of the authorities. So they had to flee again on the 3rd, on the vigil of the Feast of St. Dominic, but they were caught on the very day of St. Dominic's day. So on the 4th of August, they were arrested. And since they could hide no more, they decided to put on the habits. So they were arrested and brought to prison in their habits. And now we got all the details of the very cruel tortures and conditions which the Japanese used to discourage the faith at that time. The torture of the water, so you would be filled up with the water, and then they would press on you with weights. That would, I mean, it would be very, very painful. And then even worse than that, perhaps the torture of kind of wooden sticks, which they would put in between your nails and your fingers. So extremely painful. But since the Saint Georgian and the other friar had a kind of, I mean, they weren't glad, but they were really enduring it patiently. They were really annoyed at them, as it often happens in cases of torture. And so they decided to make it worse, and they put the sticks also in their genitals to humiliate them, uh, as much as they could. So really horrible tortures during 3 months, more than 3 months of prison.
Hmm. So how long then was he in Japan before he was caught?
Just 2 years, really.
Okay, yeah,
Which, I mean, perhaps it's a long time.
yeah.
We shouldn't say
And those
just, but
conditions, yeah.
it's like he managed to stay hidden, and it wasn't easy because, of course, he didn't have um, Asian traits,
Hmm.
physical
Hmm.
traits. So whereas
It's
his
really obvious
companion
he
could
was.
more easily, you know,
It was really obvious
mingle
he
in.
was from Europe, and that
Yeah,
increases the likelihood of him being a Christian. And of course, around the same time, and also slightly earlier, of course, you have a similar thing going on with the Reformation in Europe, where you have priests hiding in the UK, priest holes. I think we visited some of those when we were students together in Oxford, Harvington Hall, for example. And yes, various kinds of torture. And I always found it quite interesting that uh, very often the torture will be focused on something that's distinctive and meaningful about priestly or religious life, you know? So whether it be stripping people naked because of our modesty, because of our chastity, or, as you say, doing something with the uh, uh, genitals,
yeah,
as you were saying before,
yeah,
right? Deliberately because they know that they're celibates,
yeah.
targeting their
The most intimate kind of part of their bodies and their persons in order to humiliate them. It reminds me of another story of a nun, of a Dominican sister who was arrested in the same period. The sister Marina, she was originally from Japan, and they decided to make her go around naked in the city in order to humiliate her. But again, she was very patient and very kind of modest and humble while she did that. So that made them even more furious. And so she was condemned to death on the same day with the Saint Jordan and the other Japanese friar, Father Thomas. So yeah, it's a very recurrent theme, and I'm afraid it's something to do with really human cruelty at its worst.
And even now, of course, with Christians being persecuted throughout the world, even now, uh, religious and priests, but also lay people are often subjected to similar degrading treatment, and it's not something that's often well known outside of Christian circles. To the point that when I've mentioned previously about Christian persecution in the world, people laugh because they just sort of think, oh, but Christians are so powerful and you've got all this money, so how on earth could you possibly be persecuted? But actually, there is a lot of Christian persecution throughout the world. And some of the violence and the torture that they endure is crafted specifically in antagonism to Christian belief, practice, and the vows perhaps that people have made. And that's
Yeah.
true also of married people. If you have a married woman, for example, that may be targeted. Anyway, how then were they martyred? So they were caught. Do we know anything about the interrogation? Do we know anything about? We know that, as you just said, that they
Yeah,
endured the tortures patiently, even obviously as I'm sure they found it a horrific experience.
yeah. As
Um,
God's grace gave them really the grace to endure,
mm,
is something which really surpasses, I think, any human power to endure certain sufferings in this way. But yeah, they were interrogated 3 times. We got quite a few witnesses of that time. And they focused more on Saint Giordano because, as I said, it was European, so they were more interested to know his movements and who helped him and things. But they asked him, who sent you here? And he said very plainly, God sent me. And then they asked him where was his house, and he said, I have no house. I just go where the Lord wants me to go, and I want to bring the gospel here. So we know of these 3 interrogations. On another occasion, they were questioning some Japanese people who were suspected to help the Christians. So what they would do is that they would force them or try to bribe them to uh, renounce the faith. So what they would often do is to present an image of Our Lady and ask them to trample on it. So those Japanese people were about to do it, and Saint Jordan and the other friar uh, uh, kind of lay on the image of Our Lady to protect it from it. So again, it's the kind of things whereby persecutors want to uh, humiliate you by using the signs also of your faith, by showing the utmost disrespect for what matters the most to you. So I think that's what they wanted to express in putting their own bodies on the image of Our Lady, to say how sacred and important that was to them.
Mm. I think you see that sometimes also in modern time, right? In modern times, when people want to make fun of Catholicism, what will they do? They'll, have somebody dress up as a nun, or they'll go for the habit. They'll make jokes about the vows, particularly celibacy. If you think about it, actually, it's quite a horrible, disgusting thing to do. Um,
Uh,
it's become so commonplace that actually even Christians just sort of, laugh it off and shrug it off, But in actual fact, it's actually quite a malicious thing to do. Anyway,
yeah.
so how then were they martyred?
They were martyred in a very common way at the time. Actually, Sister Marina was burned, and in a way there was a less painful way compared to what the Japanese called anatsurushi, which some people might have seen maybe on a movie like Silence, whereby your body is upside down, and the upper part is under the ground. They dig the pit, so you have to stay there for as long as you last, basically. And they lasted 7 days. So they were convicted on the 11th of November, 1634, and they only died 7 days after that. So on the 17th of November. So it's very moving that when they arrived on this hill of the martyr, which some authors call a new Calvary, where now there is a shrine, also the hill of Nishizaka. The two friars hugged each other, and they said the creed, and they also kissed the ground of that hill where already a lot of blood of other martyrs had been shed. And then their bodies, either they were burned, or perhaps more likely they were thrown into the sea, as it often happened at the time. So they were almost the last priests to go there. There were maybe one or two other expeditions until Japan closed the borders to the world, basically from around 1640 until 1853. Japan was completely closed off to the rest of the world. Um, so yeah, it was a very cruel kind of martyrdom. They weren't the only Dominicans. As I said, there was another expedition, which is worth mentioning because there was also a catechist, as you said. There was Lawrence Ruiz. So in the calendar of the church, we usually celebrate Saint Jordan and the other martyrs on September the 28th. So the date is coming up. And in the calendar it says Saint Lawrence Ruiz, who was a father, was a lay person, was a catechist.
You're living at the moment. I mean, your home priory in Bari in
Bari, yeah. Saint Nicholas of Bari, but we have the relics of Saint Nicholas of Myra. It's great bishop
who you might
from
know better as Father Christmas, of course.
indeed.
And maybe
That's maybe for another
yeah.
episode.
The next time you come on, we'll talk about Saint Nicholas. Okay.
Which I got here, if you can see. So it's next to Saint Dominican.
Meraviglioso. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about San Giordano Ansalone. And yeah, we look forward to having you back on again. And I look forward to seeing you at an ordination which is coming up.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I'll see you
God
soon.
bless.
God bless.